It's amazing they got paid so much money for that.
25 million and 40 million?
I think 20 and 40. Yeah,
20 and
I think
40.
that's what I'd heard. You know, which I'm happy Mike got the money, and I'm happy that he didn't get hurt. That was my fear, that it was going to be a real fight.
Joe Rogan just explicitly exposed Mike Tyson after he rejected the rematch with Jake Paul. And honestly, it's shocking to me because Tyson used to be a man whose punches were meant to knock grown men into next week, suddenly won't step back in the ring with Jake Paul. A YouTuber who just recently decided he's a fighter. It's almost laughable, but here we are.
You know, whatever they're paying him, he's been making good money. You know, he's come back, like I said, in his life. He's done a good job.
According to Rogan, Tyson's decision to bow out of a rematch is a red flag the size of a Vegas billboard. If the fight wasn't scripted, why not run it back? What's the problem, Mike? Too much arthritis this time around? Or maybe the scriptwriters didn't have time to whip up a sequel?
You know, there's a lot of Portnoy went out and said that it was the greatest con job of all time, I mean, if you didn't think that that's the way the fight, I don't know what people expected. You know, Mike's almost 60 years old.
If you ask me, it's painful to watch legends fall short of their legacy, to see them choose comfort over confrontation. But what hurts the most is the message it sends, that even the strongest among us might one day run from a fight. For fans who've looked up to Tyson for decades, it feels like a betrayal, not just of the sport, but of the belief that greatness never backs down.
Listen, understand it was a big nostalgia hit. It got our attention. It was a big financial promotion for everybody, and it actually worked. Now, the fight was absolutely terrible, and it feels like Paul was holding back his punches, and at times Mike Tyson was holding back punches.
The first fight had more red flags than a carnival. Tyson, the man known for ferocity and knockouts, looked hesitant. His punches, the same ones that used to send opponents to dreamland, suddenly lacked conviction. Watching him fight Jake Paul was like watching a lion play with its food, and then suddenly decide to become a vegan. You're telling me Mike Tyson forgot how to throw a real punch? Rogan quipped, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Sure, and Jake Paul is the greatest boxer of all time.
I love that dude.
Me too.
And he was a larger-than-life figure in my childhood.
Truly, me
when I
too.
was a kid, when he was the champ, it was like people don't understand what a champ he was. Like
Yeah.
he wasn't just the heavyweight champ of the world. He was an executioner.
But it wasn't just Tyson's punches that looked off. His footwork was sluggish, almost as if he were dancing on thin ice. And let's not forget Jake Paul. Somehow, the YouTuber managed to survive Tyson's punches without flinching. This is a man who struggled against retired athletes and wrestlers. Yet he miraculously held his own against one of the most feared boxers in history. Either Jake Paul is made of steel, or Tyson was pulling his punches harder than a parent sparring with their toddler, Rogan joked.
Bit of a shit show, but you know, what did you expect? Seriously, when you stayed home and you turned on Netflix that night, we were like, holy, I'm about to see the greatest live sporting event of all time.
Boxing analysts didn't hold back either. One expert pointed out that Tyson's performance was suspiciously tame, saying, Tyson's punches looked like they were thrown with half the power we know he's capable of. If that wasn't intentional, I'd be shocked. Another trainer said, no boxer at Tyson's level suddenly forgets their instincts. What we saw wasn't Mike Tyson the fighter, it was Mike Tyson the actor. And now, Tyson's refusal to rematch Jake Paul only adds fuel to the fire. Rogan, always ready to call out the obvious, tore into the excuse-making. Oh, now Tyson's too retired to fight? Too old? Too busy? Funny, none of those things stopped him from signing up for the first fight. The sarcasm was biting, but the point was clear. Tyson's refusal doesn't make sense unless there's something to hide. Dana White, a combat sports purist, would take a similarly critical stance, though with more emphasis on the implications for boxing's credibility. White has long been vocal about his disdain for Jake Paul's carefully curated fight history, and he'd probably call out the match as being more about entertainment than competition. If there's nothing to hide, why not do a rematch? White might argue, pointing to Tyson's refusal as a red flag. For him, the fight was another example of how celebrity boxing dilutes the authenticity of combat sports.
Well, X has spoken. The fight was scripted. Everyone is talking about this on X, and the script was actually leaked on X.
What's even more suspicious is how this plays into Jake Paul's brand. Let's be real, Jake Paul isn't in boxing for the sport. He's in it for the spectacle, the headlines, and the pay-per-view buys. Rogan couldn't help but laugh at how perfectly Tyson's refusal fits into Jake's narrative. Jake's probably loving this, Joe said. Now he gets to play the victim. Oh no, Mike Tyson won't fight me again. Guess I'm too much for the heavyweight champ. It's comedy gold. Jake has built his career on moments like this. He cherry-picks opponents like he's selecting fruit at a market, just ripe enough to make him look good, but soft enough to avoid any real challenge. Rogan laid into it, saying, "This guy's entire career is built on fighting people who are either retired, smaller, or completely out of their element. And now, he's got a heavyweight legend dodging a rematch? Jake couldn't have written a better script himself."
This went viral. Let's see how accurate it was. Opening bell rings, Tyson is showing flashes of his old form, which actually happened.
The refusal to rematch also raises questions about the integrity of the first fight. If it was all above board, why not prove it? A second match would have been the perfect way to shut down critics and show the world that Jake Paul can actually hold his own against a legend. But Tyson's refusal? It practically screams, yeah, the first fight wasn't legit. Rogan didn't hold back on how this looks for Tyson either. Imagine being Mike Tyson, one of the most feared men in boxing history. And now you're dodging a YouTuber. What's next? Refusing to arm wrestle your grandkids because it might hurt your legacy. The sarcasm was thick, but the underlying truth was undeniable. Tyson's legacy, once untouchable, now hangs in the balance. By avoiding the rematch, he's giving fans every reason to believe the first fight was nothing more than a cash grab. Rogan summed it up perfectly. If Tyson wanted to protect his reputation, he'd step back in the ring and prove everyone wrong. Instead, he's hiding behind excuses that don't hold up.
Figure of my childhood.
Truly, me
When I
too.
was a kid, when he was the champ, it was like people don't understand what a champ he was. Like
Yeah.
he wasn't just the heavyweight champ of the world. He was an executioner.
Meanwhile, Jake Paul is undoubtedly plotting his next move. Rogan joked that Jake's probably already thinking about his next call-out video targeting someone even more absurd. Maybe he'll challenge a zookeeper next. "I'm taking on the guy who feeds the lions. Let's see if he can handle me." The joke was funny, but it highlighted just how ridiculous Jake's fight selection process has become. This whole debacle isn't just a bad look for Tyson or Jake Paul, it's a disaster for boxing. The sport has enough problems without celebrity matches turning it into a sideshow. Fans tune in for skill, heart, and competition. Instead, they're getting something that looks more like a reality TV show. Rogan didn't hold back his disdain, saying, "Boxing is supposed to be the sweet science. Now it's looking more like sweet nonsense." Andrew Tate and Dana White have never been ones to sugarcoat, and their likely take on the Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson fight reflects that. Andrew Tate would dismiss the entire match as a spectacle, a hollow performance that tarnishes boxing's legacy. To Tate, the notion that Mike Tyson, the once unstoppable force of boxing, couldn't overpower a YouTuber-turned-boxer is laughable. He'd likely argue that the fight wasn't about skill but about crafting a narrative that Jake Paul could use to further his brand. Tyson should have crushed him, Tate might say, adding that real fighters don't need to play soft for the